He didn't marry her out of love. He married her to make her suffer. But what happens when the woman he wanted to break becomes the only one who can heal him? He thought he was in control, but with every stolen glance and every unexpected moment, his heart started to change. Will he fight his feelings, or will love ruin his plans for revenge? Stay until the end, because this story is not what you think. A story of love, betrayal, and the unexpected power of the heart. He was ruthless, a man who built walls no one could break. She was gentle but strong, a woman who never backed down. Their paths should have never crossed, but fate had other plans. Damian Blackwood had everything: wealth, power, and a heart frozen by revenge. He had spent years planning the perfect punishment for the family that ruined his past. And at the center of his plan, Emily Carter, sweet, kind, and completely unaware of the storm about to consume her. Emily never imagined marrying a man like Damian, but when fate forced their hands, she vowed to survive. She wasn't naive. She knew he didn't love her, but what she didn't expect was how much his presence would change her. As days turned into weeks, their hatred blurred into something neither of them could define. Was it love or just another game? What happens when the lines between revenge and desire begin to fade? This is a love story unlike any other, one filled with pain, longing, and a question that will leave you breathless. Can love truly heal a heart built for revenge? The first time Damian saw Emily, she wasn't wearing silk or diamonds. She was standing in the rain, her dress soaked, arguing with a street vendor over the price of fresh bread. She wasn't loud, but there was fire in her voice, determination in the way she refused to back down. He'd been watching from the warmth of his car, amused. She was nothing like the women in his world, obedient, careful, polished. She was real. He hadn't meant to speak to her, but when she turned, eyes burning with quiet defiance, something inside him shifted. "You're wasting your breath," he had said, stepping out into the cold. People like him never listen. She had frowned at him, unimpressed. Maybe they just need a reason to. That was how it started. Their worlds were different, but something kept pulling them back to each other. Damian, the guarded billionaire who never let anyone close, found himself drawn to the woman who saw through his cold exterior. Emily, the girl who had lost everything, found herself falling for the man who seemed to have it all. But forever never came. One night, beneath the dim glow of city lights, he had held her hand. His fingers had traced the lines of her palm, as if memorizing something fleeting. "No matter what happens, remember this," he had whispered. She never got to ask what he meant, because the next morning he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. Years passed, but time never truly erased the past. Damian had built an empire, hardened himself against emotions, convinced himself she had been nothing but a mistake. But some mistakes don't fade, and when fate placed Emily back in his path, this time as the key to his revenge, he didn't hesitate. What he didn't expect was that she still looked at him with the same fire in her eyes, the same defiance, the same quiet, unshaken strength. He had left her once, but this time, neither of them would walk away unscathed. Emily stood at the grand staircase of Blackwood Manor, her fingers clutching the edge of her dress as she forced herself to breathe. She had married him. Damian Blackwood, the man who once held her heart and then shattered it. The vows had been spoken, the papers signed, and now she was his wife. Not out of love, but out of obligation. From across the dimly lit study, Damian watched her. She looked the same, soft yet unbreakable, a quiet storm wrapped in silk. But there was something different in her eyes now. She didn't trust him, and maybe she never would again. He had married her for revenge. It was supposed to be simple. Take everything from the Carter family, make them suffer the way they made him suffer. She was collateral damage, nothing more. Or at least, that's what he told himself. But then there were moments, small, inconvenient moments. The way she bit her lip when she was nervous. The way she refused to flinch under his cold gaze. The way his name sounded softer when she said it, like it had meant something once. Damn it, this wasn't supposed to happen. Emily turned away, hiding the turmoil in her chest. She had spent years convincing herself that she had moved on, that he was nothing but a painful memory. But now, sharing the same house, breathing the same air, she could feel the past creeping in. Why had he come back? Why her? She wanted answers, but she also knew the truth would destroy her. Because deep down, she was terrified that the man she once loved, the man who left her without a word, had never truly let her go. And worse, she wasn't sure if she had ever let him go either. The storm raged outside, the wind howling like a beast as it battered against the windows of the grand study. Inside, the air was thick, charged with a tension that neither could escape. Emily stood in front of him, her body trembling, but not from the cold. She had spent days, no, weeks, trying to avoid this moment, trying to bury the words she knew she had to say. But now, with the fury of the storm surrounding them, they finally slipped free. "Tell me you never loved me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. Damian froze. He had heard those words before, long ago from a different woman in a different life. But hearing them now, from Emily, felt like a blade piercing through everything he had built to protect himself. "Tell me you never loved me," she repeated, her voice steadier, though her heart shattered with each word she spoke. He wanted to speak, to deny it, to bury it under the lies he had told himself for years. But he couldn't. The truth was there, hanging between them like the storm outside. The truth was that he had loved her in ways he could never explain, never let anyone see. But now that love had become a weakness he couldn't afford. He was supposed to destroy her family, and she was supposed to be his pawn. And yet, the longer he looked at her, the more he realized that he couldn't do it. He couldn't break her. He couldn't break her. His hands clenched at his sides, his pulse racing. "You want me to say it?" His voice was low, strained. "You want me to tell you that I never loved you?" Her eyes, those familiar heartbroken eyes, searched his, waiting for him to make the final choice. If he said the words, she would leave. He would lose her forever. But if he told her the truth, if he admitted what he had buried so deep, he would lose himself. There was no turning back. Damian stepped forward, his breath shaky as he closed the distance between them. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. It was a small gesture, but it felt like everything. His heart pounded in his chest. "Emily." His voice broke, the walls around him crumbling for the first time in years. She looked at him, eyes wide, searching for the words that would change everything. "I never stopped loving you," he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of his confession. For a moment, there was nothing but the storm, the rain against the windows, and the deafening silence between them. And then, in the quiet that followed, she made her choice. The silence hung heavy, the storm outside beginning to subside, but inside, the weight of his words pressed against the air like a quiet storm of its own. Emily stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, she didn't know if she should run, scream, or embrace him. The man who had hurt her, the man who had walked away, had just admitted what she had been too afraid to admit herself. He loved her. But that love, was it enough to undo the years of hurt? To erase the lies, the betrayal, and the distance he had created between them? She stepped back, shaking her head. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "You can't just say those words and make everything go away." Damian closed the distance between them again, his hand trembling as he reached for hers. "I know," he whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to try. I'll do anything to make things right." But Emily couldn't forget. She couldn't forget the pain of him leaving, the years she spent in silence, healing her heart in the shadows of his absence. She looked at him, her breath shaky, trying to find the strength to trust him again. "I don't know if I can believe you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How can I trust that you won't leave again?" Damian's eyes softened, the cold facade he had worn for so long slipping away. He took her hand gently, bringing it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You don't have to trust me all at once. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm here to stay, that you're my choice now. No more games, no more plans, just us." For a long time, neither of them moved, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, two souls tangled in the remnants of their past. Finally, Emily took a shaky breath. She wasn't ready to let him completely back in. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild. Her eyes softened as she nodded slightly. "I don't know what the future holds, Damian, but I'm willing to find out. Together." A small smile tugged at his lips, though there was uncertainty in his eyes. But the promise of something better, the promise of healing, of learning to trust again, was a step forward. As she turned to walk away, her heart still aching but lighter than it had been in years, a voice, soft and full of hope, spoke her name. "Emily." She froze, the sound of his voice threading through her chest, pulling her back. He stepped closer, his voice hoarse, a whisper of a promise. "I won't let go. I'll never let you go again." And as the door closed between them, she knew that their story wasn't finished. It had only just begun. Is love truly enough to heal the deepest wounds? Can two broken hearts find their way back to each other, even when trust has been shattered? Sometimes love isn't about perfection. It's about the willingness to fight for it, even when the world says it's over. What would you do if fate gave you a second chance? Would you walk away, or would you dare to love again?